Welcome to this episode on All Things Locks. I'm your host, Antonio Garcia, where we go over anything related to leadership, operation, culture, and strategy. And today I have the honor of bringing on Kate Sybilrud. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
So you are a renowned life coach, you're a content coach, you work with branding, and you work specifically with men.
Yes.
Just guys.
I do work with some women too, but I mainly work with men, yes.
And what's the kind of thought process behind that? Because I feel like nowadays it seems that there's almost like with coaches, it's like, well, I only work with this person or with this group. And what's the kind of thought process around like just wanting to work with men directly? And what do you do specifically? With them?
Great question. So it was never my plan to only work with men or to specialize in working with men. Mm-hmm. But I was working for Ryan Pineda, and that's how I got into content coaching and really helping people with authenticity and their personal brand and understanding how to communicate what they do and what they stand for online. So because I was working for Ryan, I worked with a lot of men because that was what he attracted.
Yeah. Guess what he is last time I checked. I think he's a dude.
Unless he's still a man.
Unless he's transitioned, still a guy.
So that is how I started working with these men, and I just found I'm really good at it. It was never the plan, but that is just, I really feel that God just led me on this path, and it's just what I meant to do. Like I feel I'm very effective at helping them. Yeah.
So when you say teaching people how to build relationships online, when I think the general person kind of hears that, there's some misconceptions, right, of teaching people how to build relationships online. How would you describe that, you personally?
Yeah, so I feel that a lot of people look at social media as a commercial, an advertisement, and they don't look at it as a place to build relationships, a networking tool. And beyond just your business, sharing what you are truly passionate about, what you care about, and because that is the best personal brand. They know how to communicate not only what they do, but why they do it and what they deeply care about and value. This is why Ryan was so successful, or is so successful, I should say.
What's an example of like a major brand that just has unlocked that really, really well? Because one thing that you mentioned when I was going through your social media is that how to communicate online the way that you would actually in person. And that seems like it seems so different, but what would you say is like a brand that has really cracked that nut on communicating effectively with their audience, but it's almost like they would have like in person?
Yeah. I think there's quite a few, but some that come to mind would be Andy Elliott. I absolutely love I love Andy Elliott, and you either love him or you hate him. And that's part of the formula too, is people are afraid to say what they really feel and what they really believe and what they really value because they don't want, you hear this all the time, right? Don't talk about politics or don't talk about religion.
We're going to talk about Palestine and Ukraine in a second. We're going to get your geopolitical take in about 5 minutes.
But
so stand on by.
That's the problem is that in order to be this really, really magnetic brand and to have that type of influence, that level of influence, you've got to be willing to be hated too. And most people just aren't willing to do that.
What do you think holds them back?
Their fear of judgment.
Fear of judgment?
Yeah. Acceptance.
And how much of it is they just, because one thing we talked about was identity of like, I just don't know what to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know really what to say or how far to lean in one direction or another. So it's like, there's the fear of doing it. And then there's like, I just don't really know enough about much, or I don't really know myself, or I don't really know if I should put it out there. How much does that factor into that process?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, that's the foundation is you have to know yourself, know what you care about and value. And then what I hear from a lot of people is they're like, well, my life isn't that interesting, or my story isn't that significant.
It's like the people that say that they're like skydiving with like dolphins on their
I
back.
know.
With like,
exactly.
It's the most random thing. Like, oh yeah, we save, we build wells and like fight like gorillas and like Africa. We're like, what?
I'm not that interesting.
Yeah, I'm so boring. You're like, shut up, dude. Shut your face.
But that's so true. I honestly believe every single person has an interesting story. You know, and some people would argue that, but I believe every person does have an interesting story. It's just getting you to remember what the interesting moments are. Sometimes
they just forgot. Yeah.
Well, or they just don't think it's significant. Like, for instance, okay, some of my best performing content is me talking about how I don't drink anymore. So I'm almost 3 years sober. To me, it's not that big of a deal anymore. It certainly was in the beginning, and a big accomplishment. But I used to think, I don't want people to know that, because like then they're going to make maybe some assumptions about me.
Yeah, you're a little too much back in the day, a little wild child.
Who knows where that can go? And so, but then I started opening up about it, and it was amazing how many people would engage and like ask me questions. And I really built a lot of connections through that topic because people can relate to that. So to me, it's like, oh, that's not that interesting at first, is what I thought. And then when I shared about it, it turns out it is interesting. So a lot of things I think we dismiss as insignificant, but they're actually things that are going to connect you.
Has there ever been like clients you've worked with where you're kind of going through this process of like, what are some vulnerabilities, or what are some things that you are enduring now that might be a relatable thing for someone else? So it's like I'm sober, or I drink, or I do this, I do that. And are there things that they present to and you're like, let's keep that on the wraps, okay, Ricky? Like, let's not. Honestly, let's pipe that down, or no. I'm pretty sure that's a federal offense.
I haven't been in that situation.
Or are there times where you're like, okay, like especially on the branding side, like there's some things where like, all right, let's maybe not reveal that just yet. Let's build this. Is that kind of a thing that you do too as well when you're working with somebody? Or is it just get it out there? I typically
don't, because I am of the belief that it is okay if everyone does not love you and resonate with your brand. So I think the middle is the worst place you could be.
The middle is the worst place you could be. How does someone know, like, that's where I'm creeping into? Like I'm there and I need to get out.
Okay. Well,
like they're just playing it too safe all the time. Like what would you say?
Yeah. Ryan used to say, Kate, vanilla doesn't go viral. And not that going viral is the goal, but like the idea with that is, don't just be like everyone else. Like, what do you talk about with your best friend or someone you feel really close with, or your wife, right? Like, what are the things that you say and feel or even think that, people just don't say online because they're trying to play it safe? Is like, just say it, because that's what's going to connect, because people are like, finally, somebody says what I'm thinking.
A lot of bigoted, racist, a lot of racism, a lot of racism. I got to say a little bit better. People like, they go to Target and it's like, I go to Target. That's where our house is riddled with racism. That's for sure. So
wait, what is this word?
Racism.
Oh, you just spruced it up?
Spruced it up.
I'm like, wait, can someone give me the definition? Okay.
So I totally hear that. And I kind of going into what's the landscape before, like it was really strong with like cancel culture.
Yeah.
Right. Like you see multi-billion-dollar mistakes that happen, like Bud Light. You also see some mistakes like Southwest Airlines that they literally lose. Disney just recently, like I think they had their biggest bomb, over $200 million.
Yeah.
Because people were being maybe a little too authentic, or at least it wasn't polished, where it was just coming off as like condescending or something. Where do you kind of reel that in, where we're not going too extreme, but we're having a good product, especially with an entrepreneur that has a good or a service that's tied with their personal brand.
Well, let's talk about like the Bud Light one for a minute, because remind me what the controversial ad was again.
I think it was like a trans ad.
That's right.
It was with like a trans influencer that Bud Light pasted this person everywhere, and it was a massive disconnect with like so
what they stood for.
Yeah. So their narrative and what they pushed out and the messaging and everything was like, that is not kind of most Bud Light drinkers at all, and they just lost them billions of dollars.
So that's a good example of sacrificing your beliefs or values for views. Because I assume they made that move because whoever this person was,
it was like DEI,
was a
like
big,
pushment, all these,
and they were trying to capture another audience, right? Or possibly, I'm assuming, and that's not going to work.
No, it's not. Yeah.
But this is precisely why you have to know what you stand for and have such conviction that you do not make decisions and just to capture people you don't already have or to get more views. That's not the mission. Stick with what you stand for and don't waver.
Going back to that quote that Ryan said, vanilla doesn't go viral. Sometimes I look at some of these influencers where they're such a slave to the algorithm, where they just will do all kinds of stuff to their hair, do all kinds of, they're just chasing that. At what point is it like they're losing their authenticity and they're just riding the next trend?
Yeah. So,
because that gets really old when like everyone doing all this stuff and you're like, dude, you say you're one thing, you're this principled person, but you're definitely a slave to this thing over here.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And to be fair to Ryan, that is certainly not what he preaches. He doesn't preach virality.
Oh, don't worry about it.
But that was just a funny thing that he said, and there is truth to that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I completely disagree with you trying to work the algorithm and just do what is trendy. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because, and so me as a coach, as a content coach, that is never my goal. So if somebody comes to me and that is their main objective is just virality and views, I'm not the coach for them, because again, now we're talking about a completely different outcome than building relationships. That's not about, so yeah, I preach the opposite. It should be all about authenticity and not just you trying to do the next thing to get views.
Yeah. Cause it seems like you're almost imprisoned by the terms and conditions of these platforms. Yeah. And so if you're doing certain things, or if you're not, even before Reels came out with like stories and like all these other things where they were trying to compete with like Snapchat and all this other stuff. Right. And so you have content creators that are trying to have this balancing act of remaining authentic, being true to your brand Bible, core values, everything else, but then riding some of these other waves where it can pull you away, would you say?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that this all goes back to identity. And that is why, like, that is such a foundational piece, because if you don't have that, then yes, you will be easily swayed, right, to do things that maybe you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah.
And the sustainability, right? Like it is hard to be consistent with content. Like it is. So it's a lot easier when you're talking about things you actually care about. You can do that every day.
What would you say to some of those folks that are kind of on the outside looking in? I would probably say I'm one of those people where, you know what I mean? Like I've never really liked it all that much, but it's one of those things where if you're working with someone, at what point would you say, all right, you got to start building more of a presence. You got to start doing more public facing things. You got to find that identity, refine that identity, and start posting and putting out content that's true to that, and actually make that a consistent thing for yourself. For someone that's like, oh, all right, fine, I guess,
Yeah, well, let's use, this is perfect because we'll use you as an example here. Fine. because I did not know of you, and I found you on Instagram because you had Kelly Stone on your podcast. Mm-hmm. That's the clip that I saw, and I've been following her for years. She's like one of my favorite interior designers.
Kelly's awesome.
And I've never met her in person, but I've again followed her for years and love her work. And so then I saw the clip, and so initially it was Kelly, right, that intrigued me. But then I heard you talking, and the things that you were talking about, I was like, oh, this guy is fascinating, because you talked a lot about communication and people, and it wasn't just surface level content. And that's why I reached out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Now, if you didn't put yourself out there and do that, this relationship wouldn't exist.
Gosh, you're right.
But isn't that cool when you think about it?
I guess. Yeah, it's very true.
It's cool, right? Because, I mean, when you really just think about it, it's like we never would have met, probably. I mean, maybe in another, funnel hacking. Who knows? We could have run into each other. But
absolutely.
I mean, that's so cool to me. And the fact that you were really sharing your beliefs, then I was able to, okay, I resonate with this guy. We have shared beliefs. Mm-hmm. So you kind of weed out who you're not supposed to be connected with too.
I gotcha. I like that.
I don't know if that answered your question, but I just thought it made me think like, you didn't show up, then you decided, okay, I'm going to do it.
So it opens up like a lot of relationships that you never would have had just by doing those things, and it attracts more of your tribe and so on and so forth. And the question is like, is that worth it?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess, what would you say? Is that worth it?
I feel like I'm legally obligated to say yes. I'm like, yes, it's worth it. Yes, you should do that.
But right? Like, that's cool, because you just got started with it. But I'm sure if you really sat down, and maybe you should do this. Maybe this would be a good exercise for people to do. I actually haven't thought about it until just now.
Let's hear it.
Write down, start putting maybe in your notes app, like, what are new relationships that have been established from, like, you found them online. That is how you two got connected.
Does Tinder count or any of that stuff?
There's actually some really good stories about that.
Thousands,
too.
Yeah. So many, yeah. Okay. So what are new relationships that you found online?
Yeah, because I mean, we do have a lot of mutual friends, you and I, as it turns out.
Yeah, we do. That was actually kind of funny, yeah.
But I did not find you from a mutual friend. I found you online.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at the world we live in.
I know. It's cool.
And so I want to circle back around, pivot back over into what you talked about with identity. And so in your own words, because this is a word that I feel like gets thrown around quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just like optimize or like marketing or this. And it's just like, what the fuck do you mean? Like it's like the law. I do this. And it's like, okay, project management, what? Like what? Yeah. Like, right. It's like so vague. And I think identity, where you're looking at like core values of an organization, the identity of an organization, the brand of an organization. Just starting with identity, what's that mean to you? How do you explain it to clients?
Yeah, great question. So identity is, yes, values. Your core values are a big part of that, right? And sadly, many of us don't know what our core values are. Like people will say the same things, right? Like integrity, like, what else?
What's wrong with integrity? I say
like,
no, yeah.
I mean, but it's
passion.
Like, just like get a little bit deeper, you know? Yeah. And the best way I feel like you can get there and get there faster is, what do you hate and what really gets under your skin? Like, if you ask yourself that question, like for me, it's conformity. Like if somebody tells me that this is the only path and that's it, and you got to follow this, and otherwise you're not going to make it. Mm-hmm. Like, well, okay, who says who? Like you?
It just rubs you the wrong way.
It just rubs me the wrong way. And I've always felt that way, like even as a kid. And the other thing that bugs me is when people, I guess it kind of all goes together. It's in alignment. But like, when people say, well, I can't do that because of whatever reason you
like
come
excuses?
Up with. Yeah, just any excuse. Or like, well, I can't be this because I don't have a degree or I don't have this or that. There's, fill in the blank. People put these limitations on themselves because of how they were programmed. And there are so many possibilities, as you know. And so, yeah, that really bugs me. And so that's a part of something that's my mission, to change that and to be proof that you can literally do anything.
So using what you just, so conformity, like to conform, and I just wrote down excuses. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
So if I wrote those down, I would look at the opposite of being like freedom or freedom of expression, like the opposite of conformity. Yep. So you really believe in freedom of expression or just freedom. And then excuses, the opposite of that is like solution oriented or maybe committed.
Yeah.
Or disciplined.
Yeah.
So like the opposite of that is like, this is like, if this rubs you the wrong way over here, like it really bugs you, then the opposite of that, the antonym of that, is probably what you're really aligned in core values.
Yeah. And I would say, so this is kind of my mission statement, if you will, is to help people discover their unique gifts and share them with the world. That's my mission. And I believe we all have these special gifts. Like you were born with it. It's already, there's not like you have to go and get a certification. Okay. Like this is your natural gift. Steve Harvey says your gift is what you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. And we all have them. And so I am really good at helping you blend that gift with what you do currently today. Now, in 5 years, you might be doing something else, but that gift is still going to be a part of it because it's part of you.
I like that quote from Steve Harvey.
Me too.
It reminds me of, have you read the book Power versus Force?
No.
It's really interesting. It was a kinesiologist named Dr. David R. Hawking. And in there, it talks about like how they view genius as someone that's able to tap into a flow state at a high level fast.
Yeah.
So if I'm in front of a piano and you just jump on it and it's like you're just shredding the piano and then you tap out, or math, or someone has their physics or whatever it is, like they can tap into something where for maybe someone like you and I, it's like we're really bad at it.
Yes.
So that's how he kind of talks about it. Sounds very similar to Steve Harvey.
I would say, I'm glad you brought that up because, so my grandfather, who I was really close with, he was a fantastic musician, piano and bass. He never had
what a combo.
One lesson, never knew, he didn't even know how to read music. His father was a one-armed violinist. Okay. Like think about that. Like it's crazy, right?
I'm trying to imagine like how that.
Yeah. I have a picture. Like. I'll show you.
You gotta show me. I'm like, I can't
but
even
it's
think
like
of it.
those kinds of things. Like, how do you explain that? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense, but those are gifts. And it doesn't have to be that you play an instrument, maybe it's the gift of communication, whatever. There's all kinds of different gifts, but yeah, people suppress them and they are pushed aside for so many years. So I really have to we have to unravel many layers to get to them.
When you work with business owners and entrepreneurs and you're helping them out on this front, what are some examples of they started here, like almost essentially a before and after?
Yeah.
Because a lot can be revealed to an individual when they start uncovering their core values, their identity. They're getting closer to maybe their creator, whatever. What are some examples or some things that you've been able to witness or help with, and like a before and after with some of these people? Yeah,
I have a great fresh example of a current one-on-one client of mine. So when he came to me, this was towards the beginning of the year, we were on a sales call, and he had already spent close to $150,000 between different coaches and programs to build his brand and his online presence. I mean, tried all these different strategies, right? And was just throwing money at this thing, this problem. And yeah, he was creating content and he was taking action. There was a lack of consistency and he was frustrated and he absolutely hated the process. And I said to him, I can't work with you. And because this isn't going to solve it. Like the way your mindset is on how you're going to fix this problem. I can't just give you an exact blueprint and strategy and then you just go and use a teleprompter and make connections. Like that's just not how it's going to work. So the only way that I can work with you is if you're willing to speak from the heart, talk about what you actually care about, and do it every day. So I was like, if you can post a piece of content on Instagram every single day for 30 days, then we can revisit this conversation because I am not going to be another person that takes your money and doesn't get you a result because it's just not what I don't want to do that. What good is that for me? And so he came back 30 days later. He had posted every day and just talked about things that he cared about. And it was honestly amazing just in those 30 days to see him open up. But since then, now he has now started a men's leadership community where, because he feels very passionate about helping men overcome some shame, essentially is what I would say, like men that have had failures throughout their life. And so he feels called to do that. And he's been doing it. And he is just like a totally different person. Like, and content creation is now effortless for him.
So that sounds pretty awesome. That it sounded like that exercise of just talking about random things. You know that saying that like I need to talk something out. I have some ideas. I'm just riffing here. I'm just trying to get them off my chest.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, you're expressing that, then it just naturally falls into place. And would you say like that's what happened with him? Just
totally.
So it was almost removing that strict strategy of like this cookie cutter, and 150,000 is a lot of money to have thrown away essentially.
I should have charged him 150 now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, you should. Hey, bro, you remember that one time? Yeah. So that kind of leads me to another thing, because I feel like in that world there is a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of things that are, and I know for me personally, it's not like I have a this massive following or anything like that. Like it's like zero. But on the flip side, like
I follow you.
Yeah. But on the flip side, like I know that there's a lot of things that I have that others don't, which is a really powerful Rolodex. Like that's why I do what I do really, really well. But 150K to be testing and trying, what do you say to people that, hey, I have monies to deploy. I want to do something like this, but how do I watch out for stuff that's bullshit?
Yeah. So to tap in to authenticity, it's if somebody tells you, to do, this strategy and it's going to get you this many views, and you can't buy your way into authenticity and significance. You just can't. Like what a lot of the guys that I work with, some of the things that they've done and thrown money at is like buying followers, buying engagement. And the way that this has been presented to them is, well, it's going to make you look more credible, right? Like it's a business decision. Like this isn't, you're not a fraud, right? Like it's a business decision, because when they go to your page and they see you have X number of followers, then they're going to take you more seriously. That's like the worst thing you can do, because right off the bat, you're inauthentic. You're
lying.
You're lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it also says you don't believe you can make connections if you don't have a certain number at the top of that account. So I don't, what does that say about you and your self-esteem? If you're so amazing, who cares? So social media really exposes a lot of insecurities.
So when you take a step back and if you have like a friend and they're saying, cool, they just happen to start working with you first, where they're like, hey, I saw your stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking to build. And instead of going down that road, they work with you. They start honing in on like what their identity is, what their core values are, being authentic, finding that voice, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And now it's time to like, okay, to take that whole package,
Yes.
so to speak, and then get it out more public facing.
Yeah.
And they want to invest in moving that needle further.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't really know what's garbage. What should I go towards? What's maybe outdated? Do you consult on that level? Tell them like, this is how you don't throw 150 G's out the window.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of how I want to answer this, because there's obviously like many different strategies out there. And it would just depend, on which one. But I would say that if don't invest in something that is focused on the vanity metrics. And that's like, hey, we're going to get you this and we're going to get you that. Because first of all, there's not really a guarantee on that unless you're buying them, right? And it's inauthentic. So they can't guarantee you they're going to get you a certain type of result when it comes to views, engagement, all of these things. Because it depends on a lot of variables, as we know. And so that would be, I think, a red flag, is if someone's saying, hey, we're going to guarantee you X, Y, Z. And, I would question that.
So guarantees are one of those things where you're like,
well, when it
pump the
comes
brakes
to
a little
like
bit.
followers and this and that, like,
okay.
Because how do you guarantee that? You can't, unless it's like, okay, we're going to work with you until you get to this number. You know what I mean?
So it sounds like that there's a lot of really good strategies that when they're applied to the wrong person or the wrong thing, it could fall flat.
Yeah.
So it's almost like aligning or puzzle piecing. Like, all right, so based off of what you have, we should take this approach versus this other approach here.
Yeah, and I think like anything where you're going to have to sacrifice those values, that would be a no. That's a red flag. Like, don't go there. Or if it doesn't feel, if it feels like it's not authentic to your brand, it's a slippery slope, because you see something, it's like, oh, this person got this guy these results, and and that you start to justify certain things because you want that result. Maybe that would be my advice. When you start justifying things, it's probably the wrong move.
So one thing you mentioned a couple times was about making that sacrifice against your own morals, right? You're essentially lying. How do you, when you're seeing this with like clients or with men, how do you kind of reel that back in where you're like, hey, we're kind of bending the rules here a little bit because we're trying to achieve this objective? Because a lot of guys they're very outcome focused, objective focused, right? So if it's like, I'm willing to make a lot of sacrifices over here to achieve this, how do you kind of buffer that at times, especially with the strategies that you do?
Yeah, so I can think of an example for you. Like, I don't know if you've seen these ads that are where they hire females to be actors or actresses, whatever, in these ads talking about their coaching programs. And
yeah, I've seen those.
You've seen those? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So
I'm probably the one that's targeted for those ones. Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not against you hiring her for the ad. I think that's okay if it's done the right way. So if she's acting in this ad as if she was a client or in your program, that's inauthentic.
Yeah.
Because she's not. Now, if the ad is, she's just talking about you and your program, and she's presenting the information, that's different. It's still not, I don't love it because, it's not you or an actual client, but I understand that's a strategic move if those ads are effective. But I think this is where you have to be careful because, yeah, if she's talking about it like she was in the program and she wasn't, okay, no, you're going to
Her
lose
name's
credibility.
like Candy or like Sprinkles.
Yeah.
And you're like, bitch, you weren't in the program. Chill out. Or like,
So,
okay,
but
I seen you at
those are
Sapphire.
those fine
Relax.
lines.
You know, right?
Yeah.
So one thing we were talking offline too, where when people start going backwards on their morals or values, start kind of bending the rules a little bit. And we jumped on the subject about, your dad and how like you've seen firsthand how that can go pretty far. Share a little bit about that and how that affected you and how personal that was.
Yeah. So my dad taught me a lot about personal development, introduced me to a lot of great books when I was really young. And we had so many discussions around identity and values and being true to yourself. And he was very encouraging as far as thinking outside the box. And he was an entrepreneur and he had these big visions and dreams. And then things didn't work out the way he planned. And when that happened to him, I saw his self-esteem diminish. And I just realized like he put so much of his identity and worth into making it, like, okay, once his vision came to life, then he was good enough. And it's not like along the way, I don't know that he was conscious of that thought, but once it failed, that is kind of how I interpreted everything. Cause I watched him change drastically. And he had a heart attack at 57 and was just like instantly gone. And so I think, I feel really deeply about that. And I've worked with hundreds of men, but 50 one-on-one. And it starts off, they're coming to me, right, with branding and to get more clients and to grow their business. But the pain that these men have experienced and the lack of an outlet of how to talk through it, has become very clear to me that they don't have that. And it's just so necessary.
It sounds like there's this saying that when you're living from like the outside in versus the inside out, that the outside is giving you that validation of your self-worth.
Yes.
Versus having that self-worth and then basically having it influence your exterior.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that, I actually do see a lot of that too, where it is about the results that they create. It's about the good or the bad that they do. And if that's not being achieved, then they're essentially not fulfilling their kind of life's mission, which is, when you really boil it down, it's like to procreate, to protect, to provide, like those, the 3 Ps for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's almost different to be like, no, man, you're good as you are. You operate more from the inside out. And that's actually what a lot of top people do. It's like they have to have that switch.
Yeah.
But I think what happens, and I don't know if you've experienced this too, where when people are doing that from the outside in, the burnout is immense.
Yeah.
To the point where it's their whole body is just basically in fight and survival mode. Cortisol, hormones are all jacked up, everything. And that can affect the heart. It could help.
Yeah.
It could affect a ton of things. So
and it's never enough. Even if, say you don't fail and you just keep going, because I've heard this from many men, that it's never enough. They just have to keep achieving and achieving and achieving, and they can't stop and appreciate where they're at. And I can tell you this too. Like when I lost my dad, my dad didn't leave anything behind for us as far as like, because they think a lot of guys are like, I want to leave something, generational wealth, right? Like leave something behind. Like that's what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's all admirable. Don't get me wrong. But there are many ways that you leave things behind. And all of the seeds that my dad planted in me over the years, when he had a positive mindset and he was so encouraging and full of life, that is providing. That is still like, I can still hear those messages, and that to me is more valuable than any external thing. And I think that a lot of high achievers, especially if they have families or even friends, whatever, they don't take time to plant those seeds with the relationships. And then, okay, you've achieved all of this stuff, but when you leave, when you're no longer here, I think a life well lived is when your story lives on forever through other people because you had an impact on them. And that's the true legacy. So if it's all just stuff and your own personal accomplishments, but you didn't really connect with people.
Yeah, I'd say that's a big thing that I've been kind of diving into lately, is just more on that side, because I think that is kind of a secondary shift that happens with a lot of guys, is that we do want to leave some things behind for family, people that we care about. And ultimately, one of the biggest gripes that the family has is that you're really not around to enjoy those spoils.
Yeah.
Or quality time is quite low because your mind is focused on a ton of other things that are business related, but it's not like family related. Have you heard of that term, achiever syndrome? Like it's basically what you described.
Oh, no, I haven't heard it like that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, achiever syndrome. And it's like it's a real thing where, since people were really, really young, it's like getting the highest grade and then having more than a 4.0 GPA, and then like excelling. And in that process, they're burning themselves out. They're associating that their concept of love is connected to what they can achieve.
Yeah.
And it's wild, especially when they start falling flat. There's some cultures that lean pretty heavily into that.
Yeah.
Like Koreans and Japanese.
Yeah.
It's also the top 2 highest suicide rates.
Is what?
Those culturally speaking, like those countries experience some of the highest suicide rates.
Is that right?
World. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like if your kid is like off on these like high school tests, like their equivalent of a high school test by this, that means it impacts the type of college you can get into, which impacts the type of work you can get into, which means the type of money you can get into, which means like so on and so forth. And if it's like you're off from here, you're basically like you're poor, and it's
See, that's the problem that's the thing that I hate, is like, okay, because that's just one path.
It's that especially like Korean culture, and there's other, and I'm only saying on that one because of my in-laws, but that is a huge thing around conformity, especially in a lot of like Asian cultures, where it's like you are lockstep with each other as a unit, whereas I think here in America and like other Latin countries, it's far more individualistic.
Yeah.
So those like family core values and those upbringings really affect, I'm sure, the people you've worked with.
Absolutely. In fact, I've had some clients like that, and they even like saying "I love you" is really uncommon. You know, and so it's really interesting. But I think that's terrible. I think that when you think about how unique we all are, it's like, isn't that kind of crazy to have a mindset of like, that's the only way? Like, what if God created me to be something different? Like, isn't that a possibility? Like, just because you don't, and this is a big issue, I think, too, because your parents affect that. You want to, so many people, I see this all the time, they get into careers because of their parents. Yeah. And they'll do it until they're 50 years old.
It's probably because it's familiar. Like, dad's in construction, I'll do construction. My dad's an actor, I'll be an actor. My mother's a musician. So I do get kind of both sides, where it's like you are exposed to what you're exposed with, therefore that's familiar. And because you're exposed to it, you have you have an inclination to be more of a genius in it because it's just around you. Like if your whole parents are singers, like you're probably going to develop that side and go in that direction. But no, I totally hear you. I see that a lot when I was in Alaska with like fisherman families where I knew that these friends of mine, they didn't want to be a fisherman, dude. Like they're like, no, but it's just their uncle, their brother. It's what you do. Yeah. Your dad is, your uncles are, your brothers are, your cousins are, or they all got boats. And then you're like, I want to be a poet. It's like, okay, sure.
Right. And then you're going to be faced with a lot more friction, which is, that's why people won't do it because they're, I don't want to deal with it. It's easier. It's easier to just do whatever you do.
Yeah.
But this is another benefit of social media and why you should show up, because you can be exposed to possibilities if you're using it in the right way and you're building relationships and gaining knowledge and not just comparing yourself to everyone, right? Like you can be exposed to other possibilities. Like it's so easy now more than ever to be exposed to that. And so you're right, because if you don't, you only know what you know. So
I want to kind of switch gears real quick because you mentioned, working only with men. And I feel like there's this wave of, so there's like feminism and then there's feminism, right? And I think we kind of know what that means. And there's almost like this hatred towards guys. And you working with men a lot on that level, what do you wish more women knew about men and how to communicate with them and so on and so forth? Like
that's a great question.
You're like, I wish more women knew this, and oh my God, it would make your life easier.
Yeah, I was at an event that my friend was hosting, and it was all women in business here in Vegas, and that was a big topic of discussion. And then I told them what I do, and they were like, "Oh, good luck," kind of thing, like dealing with those men. And because I work with a lot of successful men that are, anyway, it brought up a lot of things, and I thought, oh, this is interesting, like how
there's a frame of mind in place.
Yeah. And so this is what I would say. I would say to women to don't just when men are struggling like this, and this is a fact, you can look this up, they're not going to cry. That's not going to be their first thing to do, is to cry when they're trying to deal with their emotions. They're going to get angry. And so before you just are quick to judge a man for his behavior, maybe just pause and see. There might be a way that you can communicate that could be more effective, and that might be exactly what that man needs in order to process that emotion that they're feeling. Now, I'm not saying that we should excuse behavior that's not right, but before you're just quick to,
I think it's pretty natural, like in relationships where, so I have a wife too, and she's not the lash out type, but some people get frustrated and they're like, ugh, and so I can either react quickly, or it's like just taking a pause and responding, be like, all right, she seems, she's like up to her eyeballs in stress, just let me massage that a little bit differently. So you're basically saying to women, don't react so fast, respond, take a second, and just chill out and just observe what's going on with him.
Yeah, and I think men and women, just everyone, is so offended so easily today.
I was offended like 10 times today with what you said, but just offended.
But
no, that's so
you know
true.
What I mean? Everyone's
like,
so offended. And so I would say we need to try to understand other perspectives. You don't have to agree with it, but just try to hear people out and try to see from their lens. Like everyone is so selfish. I mean, we're selfish, and we don't try to see another perspective.
How much do you think that is like our era? Because we grew up in the 90s. And like, it's funny because I feel like the more I look at the generations after us and then before, is like that seems to be such a big thing. And I feel like kind of the 90s kids are far more accepting. Like just like, that's cool. Like whatever floats your boat type of
situation. Well, it's interesting though.
It's
I don't know.
We're like less offended about like, we could call each other the worst fucked up repugnant things. And we're like, that's just
and I think we could, but I wouldn't say all people in our generation. I mean, I have some friends that I went to high school with that I don't really communicate with that much, but are online, right?
Oh, and they drank the Kool-Aid.
They're very offended about a lot of things, and I'm like, whoa, this is wild.
How much of that would you say is like people just being in like almost like a different tax bracket? Because I feel like that stuff is different amongst tax brackets.
That's probably true, but I think if you really look at it all, it doesn't. To me, this is a lack of emotional intelligence, and it doesn't discriminate. Like it can happen to any of us, and you have to constantly be intentional about getting better in that area and becoming more emotionally intelligent. And I think that that's the biggest issue, is that is not prioritized by many.
So really jumping into EQ, learning about it, untangling your own stuff.
Yeah.
What would you say to a guy that he has been it's been so drilled into him to like, that's just not what you do as a man?
Yeah. I would say it takes a lot of courage to face the truth about yourself. And once you can do that and you can stop hiding or avoiding, then your life will change. And that goes to both men and women, but that doesn't make you weak. If you are willing to find a solution, and that means that you have to look within in order for your outside world to be better and more fulfilling, then that's amazing. But yeah, there's a lot of deep, I mean, it goes back, it's like you have to unpack your childhood, and yeah, it sucks, but that is how you get to the root of the problem. And it takes work to really, I mean, a lot of people, they don't know where stuff comes from, of like, why do I have this belief?
Why am I like this?
Yes.
Why are
am
you
I
like this?
Yeah. And then but once you can find things and continue to find them, and, that's why I like Andy Elliott, because he says you have to basically be reborn every day. Like you've got to, it's this new identity daily of who am I going to be, and being intentional about that. Like, doesn't matter what you did yesterday, good or bad, right? Like now today's a new day and we're going to take new actions.
I love that. So for people that want to connect with you and work with you, stay connected, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah. So Instagram at Kate Sells Creator, and I'm also on YouTube. I'm being more intentional with my YouTube content these days, not just podcasting, because I've been doing that, but like very specific topics, right, on YouTube. So yeah, you can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm on pretty much all of them, but mainly Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and learned a lot. And I really love what you're doing, especially helping the community of guys out there. So great job. Love it.
Thank you so much. And so excited you finally started creating so we could meet and have this podcast.